Everything, all of the data was there. And this is critical because the big problem, the biggest challenge with astrological research is getting enough data. Now that's a big challenge because anytime anybody thinks astrological research, they think natal charts. Because anytime anybody thinks astrology, they think natal charts, and we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight too. But to do a legitimate natal astrology research study is virtually impossible. Because to make it statistically significant, forget that most astrologers don't know how to set that up properly, but to have a statistically significant sampling, you need about 10,000 charts, give or take, and then you need to be able to duplicate that with another 10,000 charts. It's ridiculously complicated. But this isn't a study that involved natal charts. This is a study this is a mundane study. It was just Mercury. And what I discovered, perhaps not the most significant discovery, but one of the most significant discoveries in terms of astrology is data. Because even 5 years ago, this data didn't exist. But now, online, there is huge amounts of data available. And that data can be used for actual scientific astrological research. Mundane, not natal. But it's important. So this study, I haven't actually quantified this, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is the biggest astrological research study ever. I am absolutely confident of that, at least in terms of how much data I looked at, because this is the data that I looked at over the last 2 years, basically. So for the Federal Appeals Court, I ended up, my data set was 835,000 federal civil appeals cases. The immediate discovery I made after that was, of course, the Department of Transportation. The Department of Transportation website has, for download, records of every flight that's left an airport in the United States since 1988. All of the details, including how late the departure was. So I looked at 172 million flights. I looked at more than 10 million Amtrak data. I looked at hundreds of millions of city bus stops because I got really eager about this and started putting out freedom of information requests all over the place. And people coughed up data that they actually had just literally 6 years ago. Just started collecting this data. So this was not available ever before. I also looked at car crashes. This was a smaller data set for a number of reasons, but tens of millions of car crashes. And then for the forecast part of the study, I looked at 430 individual stocks, commodities, index funds, interest rates, and currency rates. When I say big data, I mean big data. Now, I need to also give you some context about how I got here. So the research began in 2017, in December 2017, and it has brought me here today. And I thought about conveying this in the form of interpretive dance and thought better of that, but this is the best illustration I have of how I got here.
Straight line.
Six Flags wishes they had a roller coaster this scary. I started out thinking that I was doing a study about Mercury retrograde. That's not what this ended up. I literally was into this study for more than a year before I realized what it really was. So there's a lot we're going to have to cover, and I want to help orient everybody because we're going to be following that path, sort of. So I want to give you a little bit of orientation. So you are here. We're going to keep you centered here at this green dot. There's a bunch of different references for where that green dot is. But right now, I'm going to try to keep all of this study around that green dot, and that green dot is practical. Everything that I'm talking about, I'm going to do my best to explain it in a way that makes sense that fits into your world, that you can see, wow, I may not be able to do anything with that, but I can clearly see how somebody can do something with that. I may not always succeed, but that's my intention. I present this because we are going to be taking a tour of a lot of different topics. We're going to be looking at the history of astrology, and I'm actually going to, for the first time, define what astrology actually is, because I promise you, it's never been defined before, and we'll talk about that. We're going to take a look at the nature of time itself, because that's a really important part of this study. I'm going to introduce you to critical thinking, which led me from where I started to where I am now. We will, of course, take a certain amount of time and explore and answer questions about Mercury retrograde. And along the way, you're going to learn about statistics. Yay! So, we begin with a question. And this question, especially in a room of astrologers and astrology students, seems rather odd. And the question is, what is astrology?